Okay, so I guess we can start. Do we need a mover to call the meeting to order? Or did we just skip that? No, we need a mover, right?
Nope, you can just call to order at the time,
Oh.
and I can read the territorial recognition. So we begin this gathering by acknowledging the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe peoples, many of whom continue to live and work here today. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and is within the land protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement. Today, this gathering place is home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people, and acknowledging reminds us that our great standard of living is directly related to the resources and friendships of Indigenous peoples.
All right, now moving on to the agenda. Everyone can see it in front of them. So be it resolved that the board approves the agenda for meeting number 2. Do we have a mover? Aaliyah and a seconder? Carly? Now the minutes for last meeting.
Chair, I just have an information item to add to the agenda.
Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
So it's about the annual transparency plan that the board's supposed to be doing now, and it can just be a discussion on that, and we can have an approval like maybe over email or something, and it would be ideal to do it before next meeting. So I think if it's via email, it'll give board members enough time to review everything and discuss everything. And then it's also about looking at a year at a glance for the board, just something else to talk about, but nothing for approval at this meeting. Thank you.
All right, sounds good, Ben. Do we have any other adjustments or anything else anyone else would like to add to the agenda? Yes, me, Austin.
Austin, do you want to go first or should I?
You go first.
Okay, should I write the motion into the chat? Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I would just feel like I'm being watched.
So I've been made aware that last year board approved the motion that all funding approvals would go through board. And so we've realized that there are a lot of issues that are within funding and CPC. So me and Celine have been working on adjusting and amending the policy 500. However, I don't think that it makes sense to have all funding requests to be gone through board, just because club's policy committee would then kind of lose its purpose. We do get a lot of funding requests throughout the year, and just because board meets once a month, and so having all funding requests go through board wouldn't make sense at all, to be honest. So that's why I'm putting forward this motion. If anyone has any questions, I'm trying to address them.
Anybody have any questions for Yasmin? Or should maybe we'll leave that to the end, to when we get to that. Austin?
Yeah, so in a somewhat similar vein to Yasmin, I have a discussion decision item on the March 28th BUSU board meeting, and I will present exactly the items when we get to that point.
Okay, so I guess with this new agenda in front of us, we can move on to a vote. Like last time, I think it's easier just to go all those against, or if there's anybody against. If not, we can just assume that everybody is for. All right, so I think we can, I don't think I heard Kaylee either, but nobody seems to be against this new agenda, so I assume that everyone is in favor. Moving to the minutes of last meeting, everyone was there, so nobody has to abstain. So be it resolved that the board approves the minutes from last month's meeting number 1. Do we have a mover? Alex, and a seconder? Austin. Again, anybody opposed or abstaining? Seeing none, I assume that everyone is in favor. And now moving to the board policy approval, handing it off to Kaylee. Woo. Yeah, I think there's something wrong with your mic, Kaylee.
Does that work? Oh, okay. Sorry, I'll share the screen. Part of the action plan and something that was recommended by our legal team last year was that we develop some type of in-camera policy. So that's what this is. It went through Matthew Leask. This is the wording that he has kind of approved from, his lawyer lens. Isn't a separate policy. He said just add it to the board policy. It's only a few points. I did make a change though at the top about the board of directors remaining registered students throughout their term, just because now we have more 2-year seats. I think it's probably best to have the same wording that we do when the execs are elected. So you are a student when you were elected. And that's the requirement. And then there was just an update made there about under the qualifications. So anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Austin, you can go ahead with your question.
Yeah, can we go to the very top of the document really quick? So the part where it removes the and therefore remain throughout his or her term a member of the corporation, what are the implications of that line being removed? Like, why are we taking that out? Keely, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can.
I don't know, maybe I just have to like hold it right in front of my face. With the 2-year seats, it may be difficult for us to fill those with students who are going to be sticking around as students, as with, for example, with the executives, you can run, have your position, and then stay as an executive after you've graduated. So my thought was, if you have a 2-year seat, you may be a student for 1 year, and then you may wish to stay on the board for the 2nd year. So that was just a recommendation that I had. If the board disagrees with it, that's fine. The students would just have to resign after they, once they graduate.
Oh, okay. So that taking that out lets someone be a board member when they're not a student, like as long as they were a board member when they started.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that clarification. Then the next one on line, I think it was 17, C, where it says all video recordings of the meeting will stop during the in-camera session. This might be something that like Robert, with like legal side, might be able to answer a bit better, but why would we stop the recording during in-camera? Wouldn't it be better to just separate or like stop the recording and restart the recording just for the in-camera section and have those minutes put away, or like that recording put away the minutes like in a separate spot with like the general manager, just so then there's like the complete understanding of what happened in that meeting, like that it's just never shown to anyone unless it needs to be taken out for legal reasons. Yeah, I don't know if that made sense there, but
Robert, you can go ahead if you're answering that question.
Robert, I don't think you unmuted if you're trying to talk.
Can you hear me now? Okay, perfect. Kaylee, would you like to start?
No, it's okay. You can go ahead. I can share what Matthew said after maybe.
Yeah, so I would say that we could record the entire thing and then cut it up after the fact and hold pieces that are in camera separate. That's an option. So I wouldn't, I have no opposition if that's the way we want to go with that.
Okay, then in that case, I would say to switch that wording to all video recordings or all like in-camera sessions or something. You wordsmith it, but just to make sure that it's still recorded, just so it's we're not just relying on minutes. Yeah, and then besides that, I'm all.
Does anyone else have any other adjustments or any comments or questions about the policy? I myself have a slight adjustment that I think everyone could easily agree with. I think on a few occasions here it says his or hers. I think we could switch that to something a little more inclusive, to probably theirs. Pretty simple.
Is that in an older part of the?
I think it's, yeah, it must be in the older parts, but there's a couple.
Okay.
Yeah.
If that's just, I could change that afterwards. That I don't think.
Yeah, that's not.
There's any issue with that.
Yeah, I think probably a lot of the policies have stuff like that in it that could probably be fixed.
Yeah.
All right, so nobody has any other comments or questions. So I guess we can move on to a vote. Be it resolved that the board approves the changes to policy 102. All those against?
I just need a mover and a seconder.
Yeah, I forgot about that. My bad. We need a mover and a seconder. Austin and Carly. All right. And everyone against. Seeing none, 11-0. Nice. Moving on to the right to disconnect policy approval, handing it off to Robert.
Thanks, James. So we've circulated as staff a policy, and the policy is based on the provincial government's Working for Workers Act. And so what the Working for Workers Act indicates is that during off hours, so whether that is on evenings or weekends, to be inclusive of Yasmin, for example. She might work in an evening. You wouldn't want her to email you first thing in the morning. But essentially, when people are not working, that you should do your best to not connect with them. And if you do connect with them, that you shouldn't expect a reply. There are some exceptions to that. The exceptions lie in the area of emergencies or something that needs to absolutely get finalized, but not general communications. It is a requirement of the provincial government that we actually have a policy approved, ideally in June, but there'll be some sort of flexibility that you could go a little bit further than that. It's also likely going to be a requirement for our renewal of our not-for-profit status, and that, it is now legal legislation. We will likely have to submit our policy. In terms of the diligence on the policy, Kate belongs to a group of university HR professionals, so she started to work on that. The document has been reviewed by legal counsel, so it's been reviewed by both the governance / corporate side and then also the HR side. So, our law firm has multiple angles to it. And what has been presented to you is the policy as it exists, today for consideration and if agreeable to the board approval. But it is a requirement of Ontario legislation moving forward. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Seeing no hands for questions, we can move on to the motion. Be it resolved that the board approves the right to disconnect policy. Do we have a mover? Austin, and a seconder, Alex. All right, moving on to the vote. All those against? Seeing none, 11-0. Now moving on to the green levy request. Handing it off to Kaylee again.
Yeah, Jesse's actually going to join us. I just told her to join, but I'll pull it up. Perfect. Jesse, are you there? Hey,
Kelly,
Jesse,
I think she just connected.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Perfect. So if you want, I can just talk a little bit about the green levy, and then maybe Jesse can talk about the request that we have. So the green levy is a per credit levy that's charged to all undergraduate students that's used to fund sustainable initiatives. You can see some written there. Probably the biggest one that we've taken on since I've been at BUSU was the 44 water bottle filling stations that were put across campus. And we've done smaller things as well, like purchasing reusable cups for General Brock, purchasing biodegradable cutlery for Union Station. We're currently doing a sustainability audit that the green levy is paying for. We're doing that through Brock Sustainability. And then the odd student initiative that comes up that has an environmental focus. So according to the green levy, I should say, there's the different reasons why the funds can be accessed. And the one is the green levy may be used towards the incremental costs of reducing the environmental impact and or increase the sustainability of events, activities, or operations of BUSU as compared to standard prices. So any price of something that is more expensive to make an event or a product that we're purchasing more sustainable, the green levy can be used to offset that cost. So every year we, as you know, we buy quite a bit of swag to give away to students. And I think in the past, not necessarily last year, but years ago, the focus was always like, let's buy as much as we possibly can because we want to give away as many things as we can to students. But that thinking has kind of shifted to, let's spend more money on items, purchase less, make sure they're higher quality, and then students are going to use them more and be less likely to throw them away. So Jesse's has a request. I'll pass it off to you to explain.
Thank you, Kaylee. Can you hear me okay? All right. Yes, so I'm asking for some sustainability funding to make up the difference for some eco-friendly water bottles, a better quality of bamboo sunglasses rather than a less quality plastic looking sunglasses, and a recycled material eco tote bag. Obviously, everything with our logo on it reflects on our brand. We want to make sure that the things we're putting in the hands of the students aren't waste. They don't go straight in the garbage bin at Badger Fest, but that the students enjoy them and get use out of them. So the sustainability funding will help us, get a little bit more quality things that we can give out, as Kaylee said. Is there any questions? It's pretty straightforward. Is there anything else you want me to add, Kaylee?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. So yeah, so I don't know if it shows in this document, but the total of the items I think was around 15 or 16 grand, and the difference is about 12 grand in sustainability funding.
Anybody have any questions?
Okay then.
Okay. James, can I pass it back to you?
Yeah, we can move on to the motion. Be it resolved that the board approves $12,195 from the green levy for giveaway items for students. Do we have a mover? Anna, and a seconder, Alex. On to the vote. Nobody really had any questions or concerns, so I'm gonna assume this one's gonna go pretty easy again. All those against? Seeing none, 11-0. Okay.
Thanks, Jesse.
Thank you all. That was nice and easy. Have a great meeting. Okay, bye.
Bye.
And now moving on to the executive elections, passing it off to Robert again.
Thanks, James. This is a very, very quick agenda item in terms of, so there was a motion passed in the last meeting. The motion was around electing versus hiring. What I would like to do is my first comment would be, I'm not sure we really heard the other side in terms of the pros, and we may have heard the pros, we might have not heard the cons of this particular motion. What I would like to do is bring forward the cons and some of the risks that are faced moving forward in our July board meeting. There are some risks faced directly by our president that she may or may not be aware of. There are also some risks that are faced by you as board members that you may or may not be aware of. So it seemed remiss if I didn't actually bring it to this board meeting to say, okay, well, you know what, I'd like to bring something forward. So I'm just giving you notification that I would like to bring something forward so that you can actually see it in its totality and some of the thinking behind why, that motion was passed. So that's all I have to say. I'm happy to take any preliminary questions. However, the detailed information will follow. What also typically happens with these is that, before we go to the board, we typically have dialogue with our executives. And so I'm looking forward to engaging with our executives in advance of our next board meeting. One thing I will note is that, as a fellow board member, so I'm actually a member of your board, I do not vote, and I would never ascribe to a voting. I'm not a student at the university. But at the end of the day, I look forward to the discussions leading up to that July board meeting. And at the end of the day, the board will carry the day in terms of the votes, as I do not vote on the board. So that's all I have to say. And again, I'm happy to answer any preliminary questions, albeit there would be a presentation that comes along with this. Thanks, James.
Any questions or comments for Robert? Seeing none, and there's no motion for this item, we can move on to Ben and the annual transparency plan.
Thank you. Sorry, I am having not the best internet right now. I kind of froze a couple of times, so just let me know if that happens again. So there's just two items I wanted to bring up that would be helpful for the board to approve, in the next month or so, that pertains to the rest of the year. So the first is an annual transparency plan. I did write up just a few notes of what, like, some ideas that we came up with last year, for example, and some things that would help. And I did share that with Kaylee, so I'm wondering if she can share her screen and show that. Would that be possible, Kaylee?
When did you send that to me?
I sent that to you today, this afternoon.
Oh, right. Okay, right before the meeting.
Yeah, it was right before the meeting, and it would just help to visualize, I think.
Which one do you want me to bring up?
So to start with the transparency plan, it's something that the board will come up with together. And, I suppose at this point in time, and as well as over email after, we can all suggest our ideas and amendments. But the core ideas here were that student governance opportunities that either Brock provides to us or BUSU we have ourselves, such as first-year representatives on BUSAC, that we're distributing them well among the student body. That's one idea. Posting meeting agenda minutes and recordings, in a timely fashion. So, for example, within a week, just something that other boards follow to maximize transparency and the availability of information. And also, producing a public year-end report and circulating that on social media, for example, putting it on like the BUSU link tree as a link, as we do with, many of our documents, as well as another one was just for the professional expenses reimbursements. That's something that I know Brock University does. So that's something that I maybe can explain further, in an email, but these are just kind of main ideas. And I wanted to, hear from you all of what you would like to see in the transparency plan. I mean, right now, the main thing that we have is posting, our minutes and recordings. But, we have a virtual room full of student representatives here. So it would be great to kind of brainstorm ways that we can go beyond that. And if you don't have an idea, at this moment, we're not approving anything at all. This is just starting a discussion. So I'll leave it there at this point, and I'm happy to take any questions or hear any ideas. Thank you.
You can go ahead.
Ben, just for the first point, could you reiterate what you're meaning by or well distributed among the student body, like example on social media? Like what's the core idea of that first point?
So it's the, making known the available opportunities. I suppose in one sense, the availability to participate in our governance, not just knowing what we're doing, but also to actively participate, is one of the core reasons why we have transparency. So as an ideal, making as many students aware of those opportunities as possible is just something that we should have in our transparency plan. So what that means is just that we're committed to, throughout the year, whenever we see something like this come up, then we're committed to making sure that as many students are aware of it as possible. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And then one other one, by the way, I agree with what the core ideas of this. The last point on here, the reviewing professional expense reimbursements, is that meaning like posting publicly the outline of what BUSU staff, full-time staff, which would include execs and full-time staff, post publicly just what is being spent, kind of thing? Like, is that what you're saying there?
Yeah, so the main idea is for just from a governance standpoint, it would help if the board could review those kinds of items occasionally. And on the transparency side of that, the information should be made public essentially. So Brock University does this, where, for example, all of the senior executives, like the deans and other administrators, you can go on the Brock website and see all of the main for their main reimbursement account, what they've been reimbursed for. So, for example, traveling to a professional conference, it'll list the name of the conference and when it happened and how much it was. So the idea of that being posted somewhere, perhaps on the board website or for whenever we review it, things such as that, it would help with the transparency of the finances piece. Yeah, that's the kind of the main idea. I will expand on it further for the second point of the yearly schedule, because it was just something that we, like, taking from my experience last year, we weren't able to review as much as I think we should have, because we didn't plan ahead. So that's why I just want to have a plan for basically like 3 or 4 times throughout the year where we're going to review that information. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments, questions, anything else to add to Ben's list?
Can I just ask one question? So this is just to review now and then be approved at a future date. Is that what your intention is, Ben?
Yeah, so I think it would be ideal to have this approved by email before next meeting, so that it's kind of enacted by the next meeting, just ideally. So I think that would give us, like roughly 4 weeks to review it. So yeah, we're not approving it right now, obviously, and we can have like perhaps you can have like the main draft of this, Kaylee, and we can all share our thoughts through email as we come up with ideas, and that's the kind of the main idea I have here.
So I guess also if anyone thinks of something at a later date, that could be like added by email.
Yes, and just to clarify, this was something that once we do approve it, it will be on the website with the board minutes, like in the same kind of area for students to see. All right, so Chair, may I continue with the annual schedule now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Perfect. So very similar in the sense that this is for information for you guys at this point, and hopefully we can approve this by next meeting, July 26th. So I didn't edit the June part, so that doesn't apply. We're not approving these things at this meeting. Those would be shifted to July, but essentially similar to how we did things last year as a core skeleton, was reviewing like an annual budget in July. I also hope to have decolonization training. I started speaking with someone from Aboriginal Student Services about this, so hopefully I'll have that proposal for you guys soon for like just a training session for us. And similar to as I mentioned before, it's just related to the fact that we do these land acknowledgements, but I think we should go a little deeper than that, at the very least, and on an individual basis, kind of do as much as possible as student leaders to improve our awareness of what we can do to decolonize Brock. So that's the point of the training. And annual, I mentioned the annual budget, but obviously that's going to be brought forward by Robert and the executives, but I just had that in there based on when it came forward last year. And then annual priorities, that was something I'm unsure of how we're doing it this year. I just had it for July based on how we had it last year. But yeah, August, I believe we could meet with the Brock Press because we weren't able to do that as a whole board last year, unfortunately. And I think that's a really important opportunity, as they are funded with a lot of student money, and it would help to have that dialogue between us. And there's a BUSU representative on their board. There's the editor in chief, which is a student, and then a business manager, which is also a student. So hopefully meeting with all three of them, or hopefully at least two of the three, that I think would be helpful to have in August. And then most of the other things are just kind of a cyclical review of main things that we should be reviewing. So there's financial metrics, which Kaylee, could you scroll down? I had the explanation of that down there. So general idea, and again, feel free to suggest amendments to this, but is the spending of the executive budget, and the reimbursements, and then the club's levy spending. So like how much has been spent so far in the year, and then engagement levy, things like that, just to have more proactive stance in that, in reviewing those items. So that, as well as what you'll all understand is, we're also going to be checking in with the executives to hear their progress. So both the financial metrics review and meeting with the executives, I think could kind of co-occur So if you could scroll back up, Kaylee. I was thinking if that were to happen 4 times a year, we could have the first review in September, second review in November, a third review in January, and then the final review in like March, April, essentially. And so that was an idea that I had. And then to fill in the gaps, we could potentially have a meeting with USA in October. And then for February, we could potentially have a generative discussion about elections. And yeah, that's just kind of an overview of what I want to make sure we don't miss during the year. And then to wrap it up there, we'll be working on a year-end report in going from March, and then have it ready for April to release to the students, and also make kind of reflections of like each of us individually, how our experience went. Those would be, for example, submitted to Kaylee as we've done with BUSAC before. And yeah, those are the main ideas. I think the only other thing I didn't explain was in December. So there's an in-camera executive review session. So if you could scroll down, Kaylee, it was yeah, right there. So what I believe we should do at least once per year is to have an executive session where it's like an in-camera meeting with all of the non-executive board members, where we'll just have a in-camera discussion, executives as well as the general manager, without them being present. And it's just something that I guess I don't have the link in there, but I took from several like best practices for boards. And it's the main idea is avoiding bias. It's an opportunity to avoid bias, because obviously at various points we are going to be making recommendations to the executives and so forth. But there's always these psychological biases that are at play, and when we have kind of an in-camera session, just to make sure that people can share with the other non-voting the other non-executive board members what they may not have been comfortable sharing with them present. Just want to make sure that opportunity is there. So that I think could take place in December. And I don't foresee that kind of item being like a very lengthy item, but I believe we should commit to that at least once a year. And then if you could please scroll up, the last thing in December was a pulse check. So the pulse check and the year-end reflections are just basically, it would be like a little survey to indicate how you feel of how things have gone so far, submitted to Kaylee potentially. I've done this with different volunteer things I've been involved with, and it's also related to how BUSAC used to run, where there was 2 reports that we would do, one at the end of the fall semester and one at the end of the winter semester. And they would actually sometimes publish that in the broad press, what kind of a summary of what BUSAC kind of reflected on. And yeah, I believe that's it. So at this point, I'll take any questions. Thank you.
Austin, you can go ahead with the question if you have one.
I mean, it's not necessarily a question, just some comments. First off, I just want to say that I do agree with having an annual schedule sometimes. It'd be a good idea just to have something that all board members can kind of see generally when we're going to be talking about whatever thing. And I'm on board for this. I also like the having specific spots in there, like September for the annual priority updates. Last year, for example, the exec didn't actually give a single update on the annual priorities. Part of that was because of the elections, investigations, and all that happening. And part of that was just because it got pushed off and we weren't pressured to come and give updates. So yeah, like the current exec right now, we're discussing with our consultant when to give updates, just to make sure that we are staying on task. And we were debating between monthly and like bi-monthly or like quarterly or something along those lines. We're trying to figure out what we're doing. And I'm fully on board with doing it. What is this, like every second meeting or something? Or I can't see it, but it seems to be every second meeting starting in September. So September, November, January, et cetera. But so I'm on board for that. Decolonization training, I also agree. BUSU, for example, doesn't actually do land acknowledgements. They do storytelling. So the idea is, instead of doing like the land that we sit on here today is Anishinaabe and blah, 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 and like go like that, they do a story of the land that we're on and kind of teach each other different things about the Indigenous community. And it can be about anything. It could be like a story that was told forever ago by them, or it can be something that is a recent kind of story that had to do with Indigenous people. And it's just, the idea is to teach everyone a bit more about the Indigenous peoples. The one thing that, and the USA meeting, I'm not sure if it would be in October. I know they were trying to figure out when they wanted to meet already, but that's just a whatever thing. The non-exec board meeting, I mean, I want to start off by saying I am biased because I am an executive, so this isn't exactly throwing that out there. I am curious as to what is actually being discussed in this meeting. Is this like something like a performance review type thing of executives, or like what's being discussed? Because depending on what this meeting is actually about, is going to have different implications on whether or not the executives should be present or not. And then the next point I would want to bring up, legally speaking, that would be 3 board members. Would it have to be us voluntarily being like, hey, conflicts here, we're going to voluntarily not be in this portion of the meeting? Or would it be more of a, like Robert might be able to answer that part of like, would it have to be like the board saying like, this is what we agree on and this is what's happening? Like, how does that work? Anyway, that's all my comments.
Robert or Ben, do either of you have a response to Austin?
I would like to defer to Ben. Ben has brought it forward, and then I may offer a few comments there.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So, yeah, I mean, I guess first I'll just say, yeah, for any of the logistical scheduling things such as USA, that's why, you know, this is just a draft and we'll have it edited as needed through email. So, yeah, so that everybody gets a copy and can make amendments. And then for the in-camera executive session, the idea is to just have a general discussion of like performance and you know, and yeah, that's the main idea. And of course, it's not something where there would be anything where we'd have to ask the executives anything. Those would be just things to bring up during executive updates. So it's honestly just having a check-in, you know, a kind of a private, you know, unbiased check-in just to make sure, because, you know, in theory, you know, as an ideal, if there were to be some kind of problem with, you know, for example, one of the executives, like our full-time staff or something like that, you know, being intimidating or trying to like pressure people into, you know, doing something that they don't feel is right, for example, then they can start off with an honest, you know, conversation in private with the other board members to see how they might want to like handle that situation. That's just kind of an example in general of what I know has been has happened at one point, like many years ago in BUSU, and but yeah, like that's the main idea, and it wouldn't be anything where yeah, like it's not like we would be making like decisions or something like that. It's just kind of a chance to have an unbiased conversation. Yeah, thank you.
Robert, do you have something to say, or is that hand from earlier?
No, I actually re-raised my hand, but Austin, does that answer your questions, or are you looking for some more context? Sorry.
On the side of what it's about, that answers all my questions. I'm still just curious about the how it would work. Like, would we have to voluntarily withdraw ourselves from the conversation, or how does it work, since there are three of us who are voting board members here?
So I would say, James, Mr. Chair, are you agreeable to me answering that?
Yeah, go ahead, Robert.
So not just the voting members. So I would say that there are 3 executive voting members, and there is a non-executive non-voting member who is an actual member of the board. So we're all directors of the board. It is required that all of those members actually voluntarily remove themselves from a meeting. That is the legal requirement. So the board passing any sort of policy that says that someone must leave is in contrary to the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act. If you want further legal opinion, we can happily provide, but that is sort of how that works. Does that answer your further question, Austin?
Yeah, it answers it. Thank you, Robert, and thank you, Ben. I would want to flag just one thing, because Ben, I think your original talking about the just without the executives present, it might be better to instead of not having the executives present, having go like one by one and just not have that specific person that is being discussed present if there's an item, or if there's an item, or like, and like obviously ask them to not be there for that, just because if you want to have a full discussion about a person, then you can't have that full discussion without all perspectives. And if you're in an in-camera meeting, you're not supposed to talk about it outside of the in-camera meeting, so there shouldn't be a worry of one of the executives talking to another executive about the meeting that they weren't in. Just making sure that, like, if you're talking about me, then Fatin, who is my boss, is able to comment on my performance. Or Fatin can comment on Yasmin's, Fatin can comment on Andrea's performance, just to make sure that there's that context. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Any other comments or questions for Ben? Or Ben, you haven't answered to Austin and Robert. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess just on that last thought that Austin had, I guess perhaps a better way to explain like the performance nature of it is it's actually less so the performance around like executing platforms and such, and more so just a kind of like professionalism behavior, perhaps that may interfere with the board. And I guess for the example that I raised earlier about the executives being intimidating, it actually happened where, and I believe Kaylee was around for this, it was before my time, but I believe it was all four of the executives, or at least three of them. So for that reason, and those potential situations, that's why I think having all of the basically anyone who is kind of being paid by BUSU full time, which is the executives, Robert and Kaylee, not be present for that discussion. And again, it's just to have at least one opportunity in the year for that to happen, as a precaution, but not necessarily that it would involve an intense discussion each year. That's not kind of the point of it. It's just to make sure it happens, because especially when we look at, you know, other not-profit boards compared to the BUSU board, all those boards, they will have, you know, very experienced you know, professionals in board governance and so forth involved, who will actually make up the majority of the board. So they kind of will have a really good idea of how to respond to situations and so forth. But that's less so with the student union, where, and our board, where we're student representatives, and we don't have that experience, and we are you know, we're young adults for the most part, and we may not know how to express ourselves, you know, in a certain situation or in response to a certain problem, especially with, you know, potential pressure. So so for that reason, I've just noticed, you know, on the board last year, and also on BUSAC before, when I was on BUSAC, is students might not know how to bring something up. So that's why I think scheduling something beforehand that we can agree to might be helpful, just in case. It alleviates that pressure of one member who may need to come forward, but they might be paralyzed because they don't know how to bring it forward on their own, essentially. So that's the main idea, why it would be kind of all of the executives, or yeah, basically all of the BUSU, you know, staff and executives, you know, just in case any student might need to have them present and may not know how to bring that forward, essentially, because the rest of us, we are, you know, we're not on BUSU's payroll, and we don't have that link to the organization. We're just student representatives volunteering on the board. So I hope that helps clarify the idea behind this. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? I would like to just note that, at least from my perspective, it seems like it's not like mutually exclusive. Like we could have a discussion where the one executive in question removes himself, and then have a discussion like Austin was saying, where Fatin and Robert can comment on Austin's job performance, and then you can have a further discussion where Fatin, Robert, Yasmin, Kaylee would remove themselves. I think it doesn't have to be one or the other. Robert, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah, I don't want to do this on the fly, but there are different types of models for performance. There's things called 360 job reviews and things of that nature. So I think that there are some options. You know, I think that, you know, the concept of developing a board plan, I think, is really, really solid. But if you're looking at performance reviews, whether that be on the executive side or whether that be on the general manager side, there are options. 360 review essentially looks at, you know, the people that report to you, the people that you know, are outside of the organization that you work with, and so on and so forth, and they get each the opportunity to interview you and things of that nature. So there are some options there, and that's certainly something we could ask Kate to investigate and bring forward. So
All right, if no one else has any comments or questions, I think we can move on to the, oh, Carly has a little note here in the chat. Everyone can go read it, or I can just read it. Carly says that she really likes decolonization training being included, but she's not sure when it's best to bring this up. Just want to flag that it would be good to include HRE and GSV training as well. Makes sense to me. So if we're good to move on, I think Yasmin was next with the club funding. I could pass it off to you, Yasmin. She's probably way too busy at the beach, not even paying attention. Is she even in the meeting still? Oh yeah, she's okay. There she is.
Meeting, what are you talking about? Sorry, it's just because the Wi-Fi is kind of bad. Sorry, could you repeat what you said?
You can go ahead with your item.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I kind of explained about it in the beginning. I was just wondering if anyone has any questions towards it.
I think Ben did raise a question in the chat at the beginning. If Ben, if you just want to go ahead and say it so that we don't have to scroll up in the chat, maybe you'll be able to explain it better.
So yeah, so what I was just addressing was just around what like what was explained of the policy change last year, which as Robert clarified in the chat, it's for club funding requests greater than 1,500. So previously, BUSAC would meet bi-weekly, and BUSAC would have to approve all club requests over 1,500. And then essentially there were some shifts in terms of like that going to the board over the summer when CPC CPC would still have to meet sometimes, but when BUSAC wasn't meeting. And so essentially at the end of the day that's won't be continuing with BUSAC. I forget at the exact point when that might have discontinued or so forth, but since the board is I guess there's a lot of different things that has needed to change with the board due to the Not-for-Profit Corporations Act, but I'm this being one of them, it helps. So for example, last year there was a club Model UN was approved for like over $30,000 or something, and the idea is that when those aren't able to come to BUSAC because BUSAC was only meeting like 4 times last year and so forth, and it didn't go to the board either. It's good to have those kinds of decisions come to the board. The club's manager didn't do this last year, and it's important to have that oversight. And I did also Robert can confirm this and clarify also, but the idea is that CPC will be meeting with these club requests, and they will, when it's over 1,500, there will be a recommendation given to the board. And this is what happened with BUSAC, and there definitely is still an important role for CPC that actually is going to be identical to how it functioned for many years when I was on BUSAC. But instead of going to BUSAC, it would just come to the board. And yeah, this is what Hebo, our previous clubs manager, did, and really helped have that communication between different bodies in our student governance. So yeah, our current clubs manager, Celine, it's so far that it hasn't happened with her, but that was one change we made, so that there is that accountability for those decisions. And So really, realistically, nothing changes with CPC, and the idea of accountability with the decisions of BUSU's finances is also the same as it used to be, and it's just the matter of yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that, and then if there's anything else I can clarify, I can do that.
Thank you, Ben. I would like to comment on this myself because I was on CPC last year, and when this came about, we kind of like, at least members of CPC were like, well, this kind of like makes our job pointless now, because a lot of the club funding requests are well over 1,500, even just like a regular small one. I think Ben brings up very good points, and at least from my perspective, I think we should probably just go along with it, but move the threshold up from 1,500, because like Ben makes a good point about these 40K requests, but there's also requests that are slightly over 1,500 where it's just like a simple event, and I don't think the board needs to get bothered by what venue these clubs are picking, because CPC is pretty diligent themselves. Like I remember asking clubs like, did you make sure that you got like not a crap location, but like you got a good deal on your venue, and like we don't need to be coming to board meetings approving people for like however many boxes of Lay's chips they want. Carly and Yasmin could probably also comment on this, so, and Faison and Fatin, because they were all on CBC. So maybe we could skip Austin, sorry, and move on to Yasmin.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, Austin. Yeah, I just wanted to make a point to clarify. When Kibo was present, she was working on the adjustment for policy 500, and she did, during Kibo's time, she did change it to any request under 1,500, it would go through her and she would approve it, and anything over 1,500, it would go to CPC. We found that worked best in general, just because anything under 1,500, it wouldn't make sense to go through CPC, because we get a lot of requests, small requests. For example, a club wants to come in last minute, they're having a small movie night, they just need a bit of money for snacks. The club's manager or myself would be able to immediately approve it. And so that's done easily. We wouldn't have to meet about it. They wouldn't have to create a presentation. They would just have to fill out a form. So it's way easier that way. Anything over 1,500, it would make more sense to present about it, because there is a larger financial burden on it. So they would have that presentation, it would go through CPC, and it was very effective in that way. To answer your concern about Model UN and the approval for around 30,000, yes, that is a great sum of money, but they did it accordingly to the policy 500. Now, does the policy 500 have a few issues with it? Yes, I do completely agree with it, but that's also why we're fixing it, and we're amending it, and we're putting it forward to board, so you guys could review it and go through it and make sure that mistakes like that doesn't happen again. But I personally do not see, to go against what James said, I don't think that the threshold should be increased, because CPC its purpose is operations, and the board of directors is more to oversee. And it wouldn't make sense to have every single finance, or even like bigger finances that come to clubs, go to the board of directors. A lot of the times we have clubs coming to us last minute for large events that they need to be approved for funding, and we can't wait to have board of directors to approve this funding, especially because they only meet once a month. So the importance of having the club policy committee is because they're they basically meet regularly, and also they're more operations, whereas board of directors oversees things. And that's why I think that we could just leave it how it is. I was club's coordinator last year, and I saw how things were, and I was also on BUSAC the year where anything over 1,500 would go to BUSAC, and based on what I've seen and what I've been like working with, I believe that the way it was last year, where anything under 1,500 would go to the club's manager and anything over would go to the club's policy committee, worked perfectly fine, and it actually worked the best out of anything we've tried. And again, there are some issues with policy 500, but that is something we're addressing and working on, and it will be brought to board so you guys could also have a say and oversee a few things as well. Thank you.
Faison, if you would like to go ahead.
Yeah, just to kind of support the whole motion put forward. Being on CPC too, like I understand, like in terms of like securities and systems and whatnot. Yeah, like I understand Ben's point of view as well. Like it's kind of important to kind of have everyone's decision there. But I feel like the team is really smart, and I feel like we've elected these individuals that, you know, they have some type of like they were elected for a reason, right? Like they have some type of a standard that they look at, right? And we're not just randomly like out here to just approve of anything, right? So I think that, yeah, like maybe moving the threshold where it's a little bit more than 1,500, because that is kind of small, and taking consideration everything's kind of a lot more expensive now too. So yeah, that's just my 2 cents. And I was on CPC and I still am, so I know that it's kind of a hard kind of moving budgets around, making sure that everyone's kind of on things. So yeah, thank you.
Austin, if you'd like to go ahead, you are free to do so.
Yeah, for sure. I just want to, first off, I'm pretty sure it was like 50-ish K that CBC approved for Model UN. I was on Model UN last year, and I was one of the people who was able to go to New York, and that's what that was approved for, was competing in the international Model UN competition. But I did want to flag that we were discussing this as a like as if like CPC is a complete separate thing than board. We do have our vice president of student services, who is a board member who sits on this committee. If anything is going a little bit off like the past, we have a board member, at least one. We might have another board member on that committee, I'm not sure. But there's at least one board member in this committee who can bring it up really quickly if stuff is going off the rails. Not to mention that this is supposed to take work off of our plates. CPC is delegated the authority of handling finances for clubs, because it's just a lot of work for board to do. I haven't been a part of CPC, but I'm sure anyone here who's in CPC could tell you how often and how long the meetings are, and the dumb requests that they have to deal with, and just how much work it is that I don't want to add to the board's agenda, and I would prefer if it stayed on CPC. The next thing I want to say is, it's not like they're handing out $50,000 every meeting. And from my understanding, that was the first time that's happened in a long time, if ever. And there's also currently a massive surplus in that fund. Last I heard, and I'm sure it's even bigger now, was $600,000 of surplus on top of the yearly, however much they have. I'm sure either Robert could tell you or Yasmin could tell you how much is actually in that file right now, but it is, or like that budget line, but it's significant, and it's money that needs to be spent for students. So worrying about the nitty gritty of each event, really, we shouldn't have to until something goes wrong. And when something goes wrong, we will deal with it, because right now we already have the safeguards in place of having our vice president there, of a board member there, and we'll deal with it anyway.
Thank you, Austin. Just to go along with Robert's rules here, we'll skip to Ben because he has not spoken yet in the turn. So Ben, you can go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So I guess because Austin just spoke and it's on the top of my head. I understand what he's saying in terms of the VPSS being on CPC and the board, but that was the model of BUSAC as well. So the VPSS was on BUSAC and CPC, and it was through them that the VPSS would bring forward the approval to BUSAC when it was over 1,500. I mean, I was on CPC for 3 years, and it was yeah. So anything under 1,500 would still be approved by the committee, and I think it's helpful for the accountability, and I think that there's the model of having there being of CPC being the the final approver of funds. I would like to say that could work, but I just don't truly believe that it is completely responsible when there are such large requests. So perhaps if the threshold is a little higher, if the board would like to move that threshold, that makes sense. In terms of not putting too much workload on us. Now, one other aspect that was part of this change was simply the notion of having requests simply be brought to the board as an update. So actually going back a few years, for I believe it was two years in a row, the VPSS would bring all the club updates, club funding updates, regardless of how much they were. They would bring them to BUSAC just to inform BUSAC of that, and that was part of this change, where the approval doesn't necessarily have to be. This is what I clarified with Robert. It doesn't have to be the club executives making a presentation to the board. It could simply be there being a report to the board that this amount was given to this club, and and the board could approve that, or just in case, if they have questions, they could follow up, just so that extra accountability is being made there. So again, for the workload, it's the policy change that was made that is I suspect looking to be changed here. It's not going to add a large workload to the board based on that reasoning, and also yeah, and at one point, I believe, if I haven't mentioned this already, yeah, Celine, the club's manager, mentioned at one of our board meetings that she believed that 30,000 was too much for one club. And when there's this measure of something being approved by CPC and then another conversation being brought up with the board, it just allows that conversation to happen, where the rationale of CPC is just checked over, just to be sure. And that helps, as I've seen for my 3 years on CPC, it helps the communication between the club's manager and the CPC and the board, or what used to be BUSAC, right? So communication is just a really important part of how BUSU should, approve club funding, and you can see it also being transparency, communication transparency, and yeah. So yeah. So I'll leave it there, and perhaps address anything else that comes up if you have any questions about what I mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Again, just so that we get people to speak that haven't spoken yet, Aisha and Carly put up their hands. Like I did earlier, I skipped over Austin to get to people that were on CPC. So I will go from Carly and then Aisha, and then we can go back to people that want to speak again.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say also, as someone who was on CPC, that the 30,000 for Model UN was like a very specific and unique circumstance, and the vast majority of things we were getting, especially before the change, because I was on CPC for 2 years, was people coming and saying, we need a gift card for tomorrow. We want a $25 gift card for Skip the Dishes. And we're like, okay, thank you so much for having us meet on a like Friday afternoon. I think with the fact that there is a staff, one of the execs, people that have been elected and established to be on this committee, like there isn't really this necessary extra step, especially considering when we have over like $500,000 in excess surplus clubs money that can't be spent anywhere except for on clubs. And it just keeps increasing every year because we never get through it really, like, especially with COVID. Yeah, I don't really see this change being necessary. And if anything, those short-term club turnarounds when they just are like, hey, we totally forgot to include this. Like, can we the tickets covered everything else, but we didn't realize they wouldn't cover this. We have an event this weekend. Like, how would CPC get the money if they have to wait through the extra steps of getting to board and stuff? It just seems like, if anything, it would make things more complicated. So yeah, that was just my thought.
Okay, so before we move on to Aisha, I kind of realized that I need to give Yasmin the opportunity to answer because it is her motion. So if Yasmin would like to go ahead before Aisha, you're free to do so.
Yeah, thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to clarify a few things. One, when every BUSAC meeting, the VPSS does provide a report to the counselors about what has been approved for, what's remaining, and it gives a general report of things. So that's if Ben, that's like your concern, that's something we could also do to board. But something like actually having board approve a request for funding doesn't really make sense. Yes, a long time, like before, BUSAC did have a say and BUSAC would vote for it, but a lot of the times, and you were on CPC, so you would know that a lot of the times people on BUSAC didn't really care and they didn't really listen. And so that's why we changed it to have CPC solely approve these funds, because the people that chose to be on this committee really did pay attention to the details of why this club is asking for funding, and they were more paying attention to the details. It also took up a lot of our time, which it would too if we were to do this on board. I think that I think that it's fair to ask for a report just to make sure that everything is going smoothly and running smoothly, but asking for a threshold, asking to present to board, it just doesn't make sense. Things worked that way a long time ago with BUSAC, but also clubs have gone up by a large number, and they're operating at a larger scale, which means that we will be having a lot more requests coming in the coming year. We have over 120 clubs that are ratified, which is a number that we haven't had ever. And so we should be expecting a large number of funding requests. And so CPC will be meeting once or maybe twice a week to go over these requests, depending on how many we get. But I do not believe that board should be involved, just because it wouldn't make sense at all. It would lose its purpose, and it would also undermine the members of the CPC, and it basically shows them that they're not capable of making sure that these funds are like going to the right purpose. And it just undermines the members of CPC, and it undermines my position as well as chair of CPC and BPSS and clubs manager as well, which is why I think that a report is fine to update you guys, let you guys know what's left in the reserve or left in the funding that we have, how much we've approved in total for the month. But I do not believe that board, I don't think it's necessary at all. The board or BUSAC should have any say in what should get approved and what shouldn't. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. We can move on to Aisha.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so I appreciate everyone's arguments. I think I'm going to bring a different perspective in terms of my experience being in a club executive position for the past 2 or 3 years and what that looks like for club executives when they are applying for funding. I think I like the idea of being able to ensure that we have a sustainable as well as a transparent way of being able to dispense the funds and make sure that the funds are moving in the right form and avoiding maybe situations where you're approving 30,000 or 50,000 for a club just at once without going over it very in detail. But I think it's also important to, like Yasmin mentioned, to avoid undermining the CPC as well as adding too much on the plate for the board. Like Yasmin mentioned, I think the idea of having a report for the board maybe each month that we meet would be very sufficient. I think that the idea of increasing, that 1,500 limit would be also important, because something that I've also realized is a lot of people, when they are starting in positions as club executive, don't have enough experiences or don't have enough knowledge on when requests need to be made out and how long they need to be made in time for. So it would be important to be able to have club executives have access to, because I think that's one of the reasons why we always have such a large surplus with this funding amount, is that lots of people don't know how long it takes to go through the request or how easy it is to get the request. So I think having an easy way to have them request that funding and access that funding, especially when things do come up last minute, would be reasonable, but also being able to set up a system where we are setting a limit on, okay, when we see this certain amount, maybe having the CPC or club members and maybe one other person from the board be present in that meeting with the already existing board members would help to create that sense of, ensuring that we're all being transparent, as well as being as unbiased as possible. If that is being communicated clearly, I think that would be important. But just to ensure that we are allowing clubs, like Yasmin mentioned, there's a lot more clubs, allowing clubs to use that club fund that does exist to be able to cater to student services. I think it would be important to increase that limit, but also I don't think that it would be important for the board to approve all the requests, maybe having a report and then setting a limit on when we think the CPC should be bringing a request to us, or having somebody from the board be present for a request that we think is a very high number.
Thank you, Aisha. We can move back to Ben. And I think we lost Yasmin. So Ben, if you're going to answer Yasmin, maybe we should wait until she gets back in the meeting. I will.
Actually, Mr. Chair, could I'll motion for a recess. Maybe we could have 5-10 minute break and then come back. Does that sound good? Just for everybody?
That's probably a good idea, so that we can let Yasmin find her way back in here. We need to vote on that. I think we do need to vote on that, but I don't think anybody's going to really. All those against a 5-minute recess. Seeing none, passes that unanimously, I guess. All right, we'll be back